Hello, good people. This is Sister Julia Walsh, and you're listening to Messy Jesus Business. Welcome to the Mess. Hey everyone, this is Sister Julia Walsh, and you're listening to Messy Jesus Business. You're actually listening to the very last episode of this podcast, which I have been recording since 2020, which is wild now that it is December 2025. So I was in a car with a friend, another writer. I think it was the summer of 2018 or 2019, something like that. And we were having this really deep conversation. And she was like, Julia, you are so good at getting people to talk so authentically and so deeply and to share themselves just by the questions you ask. This comment caused me to be more awake to the fact that I oftentimes end up in these conversations with amazing thinkers and writers and spiritual leaders, and that so many of them are my friends and they're fascinating. And sometimes the things that I hear in conversation with them feel so powerful. The conversations felt like they should be recorded and shared with others. This planted the seeds for me of the question about whether I ought to be a podcaster. So around the same time, there was one friend who wanted to do the podcast with me. And Sister Eileen McKenzie, who ended up being a guest on the show later on, said, Julia, I don't think you need to co-host it. It should just be you, you with others. And you know what? You're the vocation minister for the community. So why don't you just consider Messy Jesus Business Podcast to be part of your vocation ministry as a way to help people think about vocation in different ways and hear vocation stories and hear tips about discernment and the spiritual life and discipleship of Jesus Christ. That encouragement helped me to get going with starting Messy Jesus Business Podcast. Flash forward to, I think it was the fall or the winter of 2019. And I came upon an opportunity for young sisters to apply for a grant for a new project, a new skill that they wanted to learn. And I thought, oh, maybe this is how I could learn how to be a podcaster. So I applied for a little bit of money and I searched for a podcast workshop that I could go to. This opportunity ended up being the first thing in my life that was canceled when COVID came in March 2020. The folks who were going to teach me how to be a podcaster were so kind. They sent me a bunch of YouTube links and Word documents with instructions. I didn't really know how to do any of this. And so the first episodes are quite messy because I was the one who was doing the sound editing and I had no backgrounds or skills besides those initial YouTubes that I watched. And I also didn't really think through things like how much energy and time it would take or how to keep that momentum going. If you look at the early episodes from, I think, 2020 and 2021, we were putting out an episode about every other week. That was a lot of work. That was really exhausting. I started to get kind of tired and discouraged. And then along the way, the wonderful saint and angel of God, David Dalt, God bless him, met with me, gave me some free consultation. Thank you so much, David, for sitting with me on that porch with our coffee in the cold spring days, with our masks on and social distancing, and helping me to discover what gave me the joy most was the conversations I had with the guest. Through David's consultation, we made some changes to how the podcast came to be. 3 years ago, Colin Wambsgans came on as sound editor. The team expanded and other people started to work and help with other logistics like scheduling, producing, the promoting, the writing. Those changes that were made 3 years ago allowed for a slower and more sustainable pace to the production of Messy Jesus Business. I always wanted Messy Jesus Business to be exploring questions of vocationship and discipleship of Jesus Christ in the modern world, the complexities of that. I wanted to amplify voices that were not always heard from. People on the margins, people who are ordinary and living the Christian life in a lot of different realms. I wanted to hear from activists and artists and spiritual seekers and writers and social workers and people who are feeding the hungry and giving shelter to those without shelter, taking care of the sick, drink to the thirsty, caring for the environment, involved with the work of justice and the works of charity. I wanted to amplify voices of sisters, brothers, and priests. Yes, those sort of traditional vocations in the Catholic Church. But I wanted us to also hear other types of vocation stories about how people came to know who they were and how God was calling them to serve. I also wanted to amplify more female voices than male voices and more people of color than white people. That mattered to me all along. It also really mattered to me that there were no commercials in Messy Jesus Business ever. Did you notice that with this Messy Jesus Business has been ad-free since the start? If you don't know anything about podcast production and distribution, you may be surprised to know that we had to pay extra money to be an ad-free podcast. So if you appreciated that, feel free to send a thank you note to the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, to our communications office, who sponsored Messy Jesus Business all along. I also wanted this to be free and accessible to subscribers. So we tried to have it available on a lot of different platforms and be something that no one would ever have to pay for. It was also really mattered to me that the quality of the content was high, that most of the people would be sharing things of depth and of value, and that this is just a personal preference, that it would never be boring. So I pray that you are entertained and always given goodness and depth to ponder, even after you stopped listening to each episode. At this point, want to highlight the many people who helped Messy Jesus Business be so amazing. So special thanks to Cherish Bedzinski, Jane Como, Jen Pick, Mary Bishop, Jessica Deering, Colin Wambsgans, David Dahl, Tobin, for all their work behind the scenes in different ways, with editing, with production, with promotion, with writing, with content. Thank you to the incredible guest who said yes to coming on Messy Jesus Business and speaking with me and sharing from your heart, sharing your stories and your wisdom, your time, all completely free. What a generous act. Thank you to all the bloggers and writers Messy Jesus Business has had over the years. Side note, the blog will be continuing. messijesusbusiness.com is still alive, and you can continue to read all the blog posts. There's so much insightful content for your spiritual nourishment there. And thanks especially to you, the listeners, the faithful listeners of Messy Jesus Business podcast, those of you who have shared episodes with your friends, who have posted reviews, who have given us 5 stars on the different platforms, who have been so supportive and encouraging. Your participation, your listening, your support, your presence on this journey, this messy gospel journey, has been a great gift for me. And it's been a joy to meet many of you in person as life has moved on. So welcome to this very special episode of Messy Jesus Business, where we look down memory lane a little bit and explore what has made this podcast so unique and hopefully entice you to go back and listen to all the episodes in the archives. It's really impossible to represent the range of guests that we've had, their wisdom, their insights, their different personalities. It's impossible to represent them all on this episode, but we did want to offer you some clips from a few of them. And so I'd like you to tune in and listen to these snippets from the interviews with Father Greg Boyle, Sister Helen Prejean, and Padraig O'Tuama. Enjoy. Father Greg, welcome to Messy Jesus Business.
It's good to be with you.
So having a healthy image of God influences the way we are with ourselves, with each other.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more consequential than our notion of God.
Who God is for us, right?
Yeah.
What about church, though? Like, what is church? Does the image of what churches matter, too?
Yeah, I'm a Catholic.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there you go. And I will be till the day I die. But it's kind of the particular container.
Mm-hmm.
It's like whatever one's favorite adult beverage might be. Say it's scotch. The bottle is important because it holds the scotch. But it's the scotch that's important. And so the church is the container. The marrow of the gospel is what it's about. But as soon as it becomes frightened and defensive, and we will defend the Catholic faith, I don't even know what that means. What in the world could that even mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what that, because it's either about the marrow of the gospel or it isn't. Mm-hmm. The Roman Catholic Church is my container, but what it contains is the marrow of the gospel. So Richard Rohr says that only the false self is offended by anything. Mm. And sometimes the institutional church is offended by stuff. And you just go, well, maybe it's the same thing. Only the false church is offended by anything. I'm not offended by very much at all because, the mark of authentic discipleship is joy and fearlessness. Mm. But you're off the rails a little bit if it's sad and frightened and defensive. Mm-hmm. Then you go, maybe I'm offended because I really want the church to return to 1954. Mm. And you go, yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with the marrow of the gospel. Yeah. I never say my Catholic faith. I don't even know what that means. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. That's why I'm laughing. I relate so much.
It's funny Catholics say that, but I don't think people go, my Lutheran faith. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they say that. I think they say the gospel. Uh-huh. If it's not about the gospel, count me out. Mm. Because that's the scotch in the green bottle.
Right.
The bottle's nice, but it holds. Yeah. So I don't know. I think we got stuff backwards.
That's a good metaphor. I do relate, especially during this time. Some people would say we're in a post-religious era, right? And as there's more and more secularization and less people are practicing a religion. So that kind of stirs up this defensiveness and sort of a protection of the institution. Like, oh, let's preserve our church buildings or this tradition or this place that matters so much to us. But that's not what the gospel's about, right? Like, yeah, there's grief, there's sadness, there's a loss. Honor the loss, and have a ritual and say goodbye. And then how do you welcome in what's new and what's becoming and what God is doing with you and with all of us, and be faithful to the fact that the gospel way is a way of journey. It's a pilgrimage, right? We're always going somewhere.
Like Brian McLaren correctly says, everybody thinks the decision is, in terms of church, to stay compliantly or to leave defiantly. Yeah. And he says, no, stay defiantly. The church doesn't belong to the bishops. That's preposterous. Yeah. So stay defiantly. I think that's good. That's healthy. That's what we ought to be doing. That's how we purify what we do and how we stay close to the marrow of the gospel. And why we take seriously what Jesus takes seriously, what he took seriously. And so if you stay close to that, then, you're not offended by all the weirdness that people get bent out of shape about. I go, oh, I don't care. Yeah. And it's also like religion above the gospel. Again, count me out. If it's not about the gospel, then we're not really serious. But if it's about maintaining institutions, you want to roll up your sleeves and you want to be able to, wow, these people, they follow Jesus because they're joyful and they're prophetic and they're fearless. And the world will draw lines. These people want to erase them. Hey, I'm with them.
I just wonder if you want to speak a little bit about messiness. That's what this podcast is about. This is Messy Jesus Business Podcast because we're interested in the messiness of living the gospel. And I think we've touched on a lot of it. But what have you discovered about how to navigate the messiness of gospel living for those that feel like the messiness is just too much sometimes?
Well, I don't, it depends on how anybody defines messiness, but I think we've settled for piety and we should hold out for holiness. And holiness is really being whole and being well. And so none of us are well till all of us are well, which means it's messy. But when people aren't well, that doesn't touch their goodness. They're still unshakably good. We need help so that the blindfold will fall and we can see the truth of who we are and find our true selves in loving. But we think that holiness is piety. And we go, oh, that guy is holy. Well, no, he's just pious. Loving people are healthy people, and healthy people are loving people. And loving, healthy people are holy people. So we think it's this big, elevated, altered, on a pedestal kind of thing, and it isn't. But we've kind of gone haywire on this because we think it's about perfection. And when Jesus says that you may be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect, well, the Aramaic is not perfect, but it's whole. That you may be whole. And so you have to navigate a lot of mess in order to find wholeness. But as long as we don't judge people or exclude them, everybody's doing the best they can, and we're all just trying to walk each other home to wholeness and holiness.
Hello, Sister Helen Prejean. Welcome to Messy Jesus Business.
Thank you. Glad to be a part of this. The atonement theory of the death of Jesus is what has bolstered the death penalty. I mean, there was a terrible statistic in the mid-'80s that the more people went to church, the more they believed in the death penalty. How do they view the crucifixion of Jesus? Okay, I'm going to give you an example. This is just 2 years ago. Wyoming was one vote short of repealing the death penalty in their state. And this woman senator said, no, she wasn't voting for repeal because if Jesus had not been executed by the Romans, we would not be saved from our sins.
Oh, gosh.
Many, many people interpret the crucifixion as God's way of getting justice. God's divine sense of justice had been offended. Sacrifice had to be made. So the Son is sacrificed, God is appeased, and that's how we save from our sins. Start digging into that because that's just a huge thing that people, and I actually, in working with the death penalty, had people make the argument to me. When Jesus died on, he was executed for our sins. They committed this sin of killing somebody. They die for their sins, and that's how they go to heaven. And what's the image of God behind that? A God that's going to demand the deathless Son.
That's so sad.
It's an ogre. That's a God who wants pain for pain, life for life. What kind of God is that? And what we do is we project into God who we say God is. All of us do that. God makes us in his image, we believe, but we are always making God in our own image. And through your district attorneys who want the death penalty, they come in. I had one district attorney come into the trial quoting Jesus. As Jesus said, those who live by the sword die by the sword. Well, he lived by the sword, now he's going to die by the sword. That's justice.
Oh, yeah. We believe what we want to believe, don't we?
Well, it's who we're with and what experiences in life we have. So you're a person of white privilege, and you never have to worry. it's rare that somebody their crime would be violent, all kinds of crime in your neighborhood, people breaking in, drugs everywhere, shootings everywhere, because we live a protected life. So we easily made afraid. So when crime happens, you have a politician run for office who says we're going to have law and order. Well, we want to be protected. And so we're defensive about it. And so we say, yeah, we got to use whatever means necessary to keep society safe. So it's that what Pope Francis keeps talking about, Julia, the gospel of encounter. We have to encounter people who are different from us and suffering and are in danger. We have to step out of our safe zones and go to be with them. And they will teach us, and we accompany them. And we begin then to really grow. We're always growing. God's Spirit's always nudging us. And where we need to be in our spiritual life and our life, we experience a peacefulness. But when God's nudging us and stirring the water, it's kind of like a balloon hitting the ceiling. I'm called to do more. What is it? It's restlessness. it's what more. And for me, the direction has been, where are there poor people? Where is there suffering? Because we have a lot. I had to be educated. What did I know about what poor people really suffered? What it meant to be on a pitiful welfare check? What it meant that you couldn't get a job because you live in the wrong zip code of a neighborhood and they don't even want to give you a job. What does that mean? What does that feel like?
Yeah. Messy Jesus Business Podcast is really interested in what it means to be a radical disciple and to live the gospel. You've talked a lot about the messiness of that, but for you, what does radical discipleship mean? And how do you understand your identity as a radical disciple?
Okay, well, radical means rod ex root, the root of the gospel of Jesus. Here we go with the death penalty. Jesus said, forgive those who hurt you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Then you come face to face in your society with the death penalty. Radix, the root of the gospel of Jesus, is never to return evil for evil. And it doesn't matter that you make it legal. It doesn't matter that you have, well, the Supreme Court said this is okay. The radical message of the gospel of Jesus, it can never be permissible to give our government the authority to kill our fellow human beings after they've been rendered defenseless. That's the radical gospel of Jesus.
Amen. You've lived through a lot. You've definitely been a great witness, like you felt called to be after you witnessed Pat's execution. I'm wondering what suggestions you have for younger generations who desire to live the gospel with authenticity, courage, and joy.
Get out of your comfortable place where you are and go join in with those that are doing the gospel and living in truth. Go with those that are in the poor neighborhoods and struggling for racial justice, which means you're going to be educated. You can't do it without a community. You can't just pile up a whole bunch of books, go into a cave, I'm going to get educated. You got to be immersed in a community of the faithful that are doing it. That's what you do. And it means you got to take some steps. And it can start out, it's good to serve food to the homeless, but immersion so you can be in the presence of people. Because as Pope Francis says all the time, that encounter with the person, one of the first things he did after he was Pope was go to the prison. Go to those places where the people are. And it's presence with a community of people. There's no room for lone rangers to go in and say, oh, I'm going to go and do this. Because it's a long road. It's a hard road, and it has a lot of ups and downs. And without community at our side, we can never make it. I could never make it without community by my side. And my community consists of my own religious sisters of St. Joseph, who helped grow me up and help me be who I am today. But I'm in a community of lawyers, human rights activists, and people that are in there working. And that keeps me going.
Hello, Padraig O'Tuama. Welcome to Messy Jesus Business.
It's nice to be with you, Julia.
For you and your work with words and accompanying people, maybe that's a safer way than minister. How does imagination influence your work?
The older I've gotten, the more I think imagination is more important. So I suppose, first of all, to think about the word imagination, often it's used to think about an imaginary friend or using your imagination when you're younger. Like when you look again at the poem of Genesis, in the image of God, God made them. Male and female, God made them. And the word there, image, could be translated equally as imagination. And I'm interested that the poets who wrote that text, speaking about how they understood the source of the soul. I mean, it's not a scientific document, but it is speaking about something essential to the human person, that they used language and imagination as some of the early functions of God, and how extraordinary that is, to elevate language and imagination. And that the way we see something can be the way something turns out. And that can be a curse as well as a goodness. I've worked for a long time in conflict resolution, and one of the most complicated questions when people are in extended, amplified, elevated experiences of systemic conflict. And I suppose I'm specifically speaking about Ireland here when it comes to the relationship with Britishness and Irishness. One of the most difficult things can be to ask the question, what do you imagine the outcome will be? What would good look like? People don't agree, and for understandable reasons. Some people say, if we could get back to the way things were. Somebody else will say, if everything can be uncovered. Somebody will say, if we are compensated thoroughly. Somebody else will say, well, if we can compromise on these aspects. And so the imagination of what comes after the showdown can be just as conflict-ridden as the conflict that you're seeking to address. And so therefore, for me, the question is what is the quality of our imagination? Similarly, I've met people involved in conflict resolution who will put off all kinds of things because they think, well, I will be able to spend more time with my children after I get this resolution done. I will be able to spend a little bit more time reading a poem a day after this resolution. And that too is an interesting function about an imagination about a far-off land. And in a certain sense, you can see this as creating the perfect obstacle. I create the obstacle that actually prevents me from doing all kinds of things. And in so doing, I give my opponent the power to hold me back from all kinds of things that could be life-giving. When I've been in situations where people are speaking about postponing the good while they're waiting for the pain to be revealed, I've sometimes said, well, why don't you do just a little bit of it tomorrow or today, or read half a poem today. It's okay. Or a verse or a line, whatever it is that's going to be life-giving. And that too is a function of the imagination, not because it says, oh, look, if I do this pleasant thing now, it'll make all the badness go away. It won't. But somehow doing the pleasant thing now, the thing that is good in and of itself, is a demonstration of the function of the imagination to say, I imagine a life where this will be possible on a deeper level. And actually, by imagining it, I'm enacting it in the here and now. And so for people who have been in sustained conflict, I think the imagination is a powerful function to remember and to recreate what it is we think we're made for, and to try, in as far as we're able safely, or safely enough, to try to do even a small gesture of that in the here and now might mean that the imagination has a correspondence with something that you're able to do.
What did you learn about the messiness of peacemaking?
An enormous amount. It's easy to think that, doing good is always good and always easy. But it's not. I think doing good is very difficult, because you might think you're doing good and realize afterwards, actually, that was naive, or that was mistaken, or I was highlighting the wrong thing that wasn't the real problem, or I was caught up in competition with another organization, or there was tension within our own community, and actually that tension distracted us from being able to tell the truth, because I was worried about not being exposed myself or not saying something critical to somebody who I love. I suppose I learned in terms of the messiness of peace how much resistance is there. You know, in lots of languages we have phrases for better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And I think so many of us are willing to put up with a broken system because the possibility of an improved system is new, and the new invites us into trying to believe in the potential for collaboration. And that can be very frightening. And I think often people would rather put up with the thing that they don't like.
Messy Jesus Business is, we say it's about radical discipleship. What is discipleship for you? And what does that mean? And do you consider yourself a disciple?
It's not a word I think about it at all, really. I suppose I've heard it being used in a way that has a certain cookie cutter imagination, and a way where people are eager to become like Jesus. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about the literature of the Bible is that there's so many people there who probably were nothing like Jesus, but they're still there. And that there is an entire village of people where you to get all the characters of the Bible, even just to say your favorite characters of the Bible, they probably still wouldn't agree with each other. And so if discipleship is to mean something fruitful, I think it has to mean something about how messy that's going to be, people disagreeing with each other. And that's a demonstration of the perfection of what it means to be in community. So for me, discipleship is not a word I think of because I hear it so often used in a way of follow and don't ask questions. And for me, that has been so connected with abuse in my own life as well as in the lives of others around me. What interests me, if I am to think about the Gospels and Jesus of Nazareth, is to take himself and myself seriously enough to do the work and to ask good questions.
To be totally yourself in the way you show up and love and live your life.
Yeah, completely.
Since this is the final episode, it seems appropriate to check in with some of our previous guests and hear what they're up to. So our producer, Colin Wambsgans, reached out to a few of them and had his own little interview without me. So you'll hear Colin speaking with Dr C Vanessa White, Father Justin Claravall, and Sister Sarah Hennessy.
Dr. Vanessa White, thanks for coming back on Messy Jesus Business.
It's good to be with you.
Do you find that your students now in the last 5 years have sort of looking for a type of spirit in any different way?
This is what I would say. I was having a conversation with my colleague who's a biblical scholar. We've been very impressed with the students over the past 2 years who really want to know, who really want to learn, who really are open to what we have to share with them and the work that they may have to do. I would say probably before COVID, there was more of a sense of students want to come in and get that piece of paper and get out.
Right. Yeah.
And have this piece of paper to prove that they got this degree. I think with the change in what has taken place globally, what has taken place in our United States, the sense of change and chaos and what's been going on, particularly like I'm in Chicago. And if you know right now in Chicago, we have immigration forces who are snatching people from their homes, from their schools, off the streets. They're working. And so you don't know day by day what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
In the midst of that, the only entity or who may understand is that spirit, that God, and to have that lament and that cry to God to sustain me through this experience. I went to Mass this past Sunday, the 9:00 Mass, and I could barely find a seat. It was hard to find a seat. There were so many people at Mass.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've noticed that there has been an increase. I actually think there have been some studies that there has been an increase in Mass attendance because people are in need to find something that they can hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the midst of these challenges. The other big thing, as you know, the increase in vocations in those religious orders that are deemed more traditional.
Sure.
Because we also have a group of young people who've grown up in chaos, who grew up and when their parents were reacting against the strictness of the Catholic faith, and then they raised their children to have be more open, and I'll let them decide, and whatever, varieties of different reasons. So the next generation grew up, and they may not have had a strong connection with any institutional church. And then actually their generation is growing up saying, I want something. The increase in adoration, the increase in daily or weekly rosary gatherings, those novenas, divine mercies, those things which are very tangible expressions of our Catholic faith. And we have people who want to, they need that because everything is in chaos. What can I grab hold to?
Yeah.
Some of my generation, I'm part of the Vatican II, post-Vatican II generation. I can remember when Mass was in Latin as a young child, and then the rail changing and all that.
Yeah.
But some of my colleagues who are my age, they kind of downplay that, and that almost like that's not real. And I'm like, no, that is real. This is real expressions. And it may not have the same meaning, and adoration may not have the same meaning as it did during pre-Vatican times, but there is something that person, that seeker, that spiritual seeker is getting from that they need. Because of the fact I'm a spirituality scholar, and I'm primarily focused in the praxis of spirituality.
Just to be clear, for praxis, you mean as it is practiced among
as it is practiced.
People. Yeah.
Yes, praxis, praxis. I am more comfortable with the messiness.
Yeah.
My colleagues who may be from other disciplines where things are very much linear, very much, distinct, this is how it is, may not be as comfortable with the messiness. But I'm comfortable with the messiness. I've had conversations with Sister Julia. She's comfortable with the messiness.
It's true.
So we work well. We were at I saw her last at the Franciscan Action Network, and it was like, okay, we can't make it down to. They were having protests. This is around the time where the big protests were happening in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
Okay, they're not happening here. Let's just have our little protests on the corner of this hotel where we're having this conference, and some people just joined us. That's all right.
Yeah, exactly.
We can be spontaneous. There's a sense of spontaneity that comes with being messy.
Yeah.
That some people are not comfortable with. But then I say Jesus was messy. So, hey, I'm in good company.
Father Justin, welcome back to Message Jesus Business.
I've missed the mess. I'm not in the business anymore.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
I still haven't really figured out a really clear narrative of how it got here. I think it was very clear what the mess was like living in the pandemic, but also living in the pandemic in Dolores Mission and Boyle Heights and things like that. And now I'm in South London, I'm in Brixton. There's definitely messes over here, but I'm a student. So there's like, the mess doesn't feel like it has the same amount of consequences as it did.
Interesting.
When I was in the parish, you know what I mean?
Sure. What is the program and where is it?
It is the Masters of Arts in Traditional Arts, which is the only place where you can study something called a Master of Arts in Traditional Arts. It's in the School of Traditional Arts, which is part of the King's Foundation. So it's a long title, the King's Foundation School of Traditional Arts. And I'm in the Master of Arts program in Traditional Arts. And it's in London, and it's in a East London part called Shoreditch. Small building, small school, 10 people in each year in the program.
Wow.
It's unique. And a lot of people from all over the world come to the school because it's not like mainstream art schools in what they teach and sort of the way they try to incorporate some philosophical concepts and religious traditions into the art.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But that said, I'm the first priest that's ever attended the school. So as religious, as much as they want to, they're like, oh yeah, we're not a mainstream art school. We could talk about God here and everything. Like they said, I'm the first priest to be there. So that's pretty, that's cool. I'm glad I'll make history. Yeah.
I had one quick question about a part of the interview that I don't expect you to remember this, but I am curious. One of the last things you said in the interview, building out of talking about, the mess, you talked about the retreat where you got lost.
Oh my gosh. It happened after that? Yeah, she was talking to post-traumatic stress disorder, Justin.
Well, I guess that's part of what I was curious about, is that, like, how does that time come up, or that event, those hours that you had to spend literally like wandering around trying to find your way back, and, you know, being legitimately afraid for your safety, but also seeing this moment of like absolute beauty, and then also finding your way back after that. I don't know if it comes up at all for you.
It does a lot. It came up recently, even when I was on a walk with some friend, or on a hike with some friends in my class, actually, a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, when long walks, we get into stories, and I told them the shortened version of the story. But it comes up for me a lot because the day after, when I was really duking it out with God about what happened that night, the insight that I came to accept has been very formative to me. The insight about how my perception of what is fortunate and unfortunate, I hesitate to use the words good and bad, like on purpose. Like I really don't like using those words ever, really, good and bad, or good and evil even. So I'd say fortunate and unfortunate circumstances and events, pains and pleasures, all that stuff. I only see that according to my own perception, according to where I'm at this particular moment. So something happens to me, and I would immediately judge that as bad or evil or unfortunate or painful because of what my mind is like in a particular state, in that particular moment, in a state of fear. Or sometimes I'm selfish, and so something doesn't go the way that I want it to go, even if it's not a bad thing necessarily. It just doesn't go the way that I want it to go. So sure. I just started to see how limited my perception and my thinking and is in relation to my heart. This is all a very like hard way of God teaching me this lesson, by the way. But so that was sort of like the hard lesson, which was that I can never really call anything good or bad in the moment because I don't know what it's going to do in the future. The flip side of that, this is where it's theological and I think really, really Christian, is that I started to see God not as like the genie or the great protector, even though he is. God is, God is the one of justice and all that stuff. But what I started to imagine God more of is life and love. Life and love, so powerful, like a needle with a thread, sewing up all the tattered rags of my history and all history, and weaving this beautiful tapestry that looks beautiful once I'm far enough to step out and see it as a whole. But in my own limited way, all I see are the tattered rags. And I might get a glimpse of a thread, but most of the time I'm focusing on how messed up everything is. You know what I mean? The mess. I'm focusing on the mess, and I'm judging the mess as ugly. But God is looking at something, and he's not calling it a mess. It's infinite potential to weave something so beautiful together, like splattering wet watercolors on a wet page where you just see blotches of color, and God is like starting to put form to all of those colors, and then it turns out like a Turner watercolor painting where there's like little faint outlines of things, but you see an image, you see a whole.
Yeah.
So that getting lost in the woods and almost dying, which I would consider a bad thing,
Right.
2-3 years later, obviously I'm looking at that as a very pivotal moment in my life as a good thing because of what it allowed me to glimpse about myself and my own limitations, and what it showed me about God, who is able to work through things that I even think are bad and horrible, and is able to weave something beautiful out of it.
Yeah.
So I always keep that in the back of my mind every time bad news is what I hear, unfortunate events occur, or anytime I'm worried about the future. I just think, well, I'm not seeing this in the light of eternity. And I know deep in my bones now that God is life and love. So God will bring life and love out of everything. And I just won't see it until the very end, probably.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I was about to say heavy, but I don't know what I said.
This is art. This is my art, man. Like I'm actually a really heavy guy.
Sarah Hennessy, thanks for coming on Messy Jesus Business again. You were the very first guest. Since the podcast was initially kind of an outgrowth of the coronavirus shutdown, there's a sort of essential question she asks pretty much everybody about the messiness of gospel living.
Yeah.
Whether or not you remember your answer then, and I can tell you what it was if you'd like a reminder of that. With that thought in there, what has changed in the last 5 years?
Right.
Both since you've done the interview and also just, since the coronavirus.
I think that Messy Jesus Business, for me, in the last years, the world feels messier and I feel happier. The world feels messier. The world feels like the chaos is increasing, like it is doubling down, like I'm not sure where to turn. And I think the gospel call in that messiness gets clearer for me. I find myself turning to my faith. I find myself turning to scripture. My daily readings of the gospel become more crystal clear. They become more like, okay, so you're not sure what to do about how we're treating new Americans, and you're not sure about what to do about how to stand up. Well, Jesus says, go out into the field. Jesus says, be here in the mess. Like, I just feel my faith speaking to the current situation more and more clearly as the mess increases.
It's not that you make the world less messy, make your own way through it more clear.
Yes. And, professionally, I'm a professional listener. I'm a spiritual director. And I've been saying for at least the last year and maybe longer that everyone I'm listening to is really hurting. And there's multiple levels of hurt. There's the personal hurt, and then kind of the communal hurt, and then the world hurt. And everyone's feeling all those levels at the same time. For myself, somehow I'm feeling those levels, but I'm also feeling some resilience, and I'm talking to others and I'm sharing and connecting, and it's bringing me hope. I think when I said about being happier, I was in a pretty deep depression when Messy Jesus Business started, and then probably still a little bit when I did the first podcast. And now that's not happening for me as much. I've really found some balance, some grace, some peace, and I'm so grateful. I'm very grateful for my life and the people that are surrounding my life, and digging into my Franciscan roots and really finding hope and resilience in that.
How does your work as a spiritual director affect that or influence that?
I think the power of listening is really important in this moment, because we're not finding a lot of ways to truly listen to each other. And to be listened to is life-changing, is revolutionary, both as a listener, but also as someone who trained spiritual directors. They get so excited. They're just like, oh my gosh, my whole life is changing. My sense of God is changing. My sense of myself is changing as I become a better listener to my husband, to my kids, to my coworkers, to my friends. And I think the world needs brave listeners in this moment more than anything. And I've found in my own life that listening undoes those knots of self-hatred, of shame, of being stuck. And so listening is really an avenue for me into well-being, into health, into spiritual wholeness, all of those things. I'm curious about what I said in the first podcast about the messy.
I'll have to read it because I had the transcript, but let me see. She asked, the relationship with Jesus looks now in your everyday life. Yeah, in particular, I'm interested in how, is it a messy thing? Like, is it, now that you're a sister, is your life pretty good, tidy, organized, or is there an order to it? Is it chaotic? Is there a struggle? And what you eventually said was the relationship with Jesus, the thing that instead of being messy or neat, what comes to me sometimes is my relationship with Jesus is very clear, and sometimes it is very vague. And I go through different periods of that.
Nice.
So that's, and you sort of then kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because today I was like, clarity.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, I'm in a space of clarity and the world is messy. And and I think one of the graces out of that is it doesn't mean messy world, messy insides.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't mean clear world, clear insides. There's not a one-to-one correspondence. But gospel living, I think partly because it's communal, gospel living is always messy. But it also, in a messy world, can find its calling. So I mentioned that Colin Wambsgans came on as the amazing audio producer in 2022. And he's been the one working behind the scenes really hard for the past 3 years. Colin, welcome to Messy Jesus Business. Let's chat.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Right. Finally. Tell me, how's it been for you to be working on this podcast?
It's been a real pleasure to listen to all these conversations over the years. The people you've talked to have been really fascinating, pretty much to a person, and have led some pretty interesting lives and have really interesting things to say about what they do and how they think about taking the things they learn through their religion and their religious experience and belief and applying it to their own lives. And it's the ways they've done it are really positive and uplifting, and especially during times that are oftentimes, challenging and give people a lot of reasons to give up. I don't think that you went into this or into any conversation thinking that this is going to inspire people. The inspiration was not necessarily a goal of yours, but
no.
I think that makes it much more genuine, the ways that it does help people to keep going. Because you don't inspire people really to do this hard work by trying to act like everything's actually great all the time. The mess is a really important part of it, right? So getting a chance to encounter that in a really deep way many, many, many times a year was a really great part of working on this show.
I mean, you and I have talked about this in other conversations, that sometimes when we're doing this work, it can be really hard to trust the impact, right? Trust that people are listening. I think every artist, every creative person who puts things into the world struggles with, like, why am I doing this? Is it making a difference, right? And yet, before we started this recording, we were talking a little bit about some of the fruits that we are aware of, stories that we've heard about people who have listened to Messy Jesus Business over the years, and it's had an impact on their own discernment and their own vocational choices. And it has helped people to gain more clarity about call and how they're meant to say yes to the mess of being a Christian and give their lives to Jesus. So for that, I just want to pause and, give praise and thanks to God, and thanks be to God that I was gifted with amazing teammates that helped the fruit of our work be something that people would want to listen to, and it had an impact. So it's really great. I thank you so much for all you've done, Colin. And for all the time you've put your whole heart into this project, and you've kept me organized and helped me remember, I have to do that thing. And you've observed me become increasingly more scattered probably over the years as my ministries and my life has changed, and walked with me and been patient as I've done my own discernment about whether to keep Messy Jesus Business podcast going. So we've arrived at this point where it's the last episode that we're sharing with the world. And yet we hope that as we keep these archives alive, that people continue to listen and be transformed by the amazing witness that our guests share.
How much more busy are you now as the vocation minister for the FSPA? Any more details you can share about like what you're up to now and how that has changed over the last 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can say that the work has evolved, and compared to when I began 5 years ago, it's drastically shifted. And yes, it's consuming much more of my time and energy, but I'll explain why in a minute. Let me just explain that the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, yes, our headquarters, our mother house is in La Crosse, Wisconsin, but we have sisters throughout the country and in other places in the world. And I think for most of our history, we've been not just Midwest centered. Sure. Along the way, I received an assistant. Thanks be to God. Shout out to Sue Amble, who is the vocation promotions assistant and helps me with the work. And I work with a formation team of other sisters and the leadership team of our congregation. I am also, as of this past October, just a couple months ago, now the candidate director for the community. So we have a woman who's a candidate, which is the stage of formation before she's a novice. So she's on her way into the life of sisterhood. And so really I have these two roles. And yes, it is a lot of work and time and energy and et cetera, et cetera. Most of it I can't be very public about. Like, most of it's just hidden. And, it's like as if I were a counselor or something and I'm having conversations, I can't really say. But yeah, it's really fun work. I love religious life. I love sharing it with people. I love introducing people to it and helping people to understand it better. And I think there's a lot of richness that's found in the Franciscan life that I want more people to know about. So this is consuming me. It's taking most of my energy and time now. And I'm very grateful for the chance to serve religious life in my community at this point.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing it. I mean, honestly, given the way that you talk to people about how they experience faith and stuff, I think that they've made a good decision getting you in that job. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Nice. Do you have any idea or thoughts about what the mess means now to you as you're wrapping up this podcast?
So when I started Messy Jesus Business blog in 2010, it was influenced by my own formation as a Franciscan sister and coming to understand that the Franciscan worldview is rooted in the reverence of the incarnation, of God becoming a person in this world and God making all things good and beautiful. The Franciscan reflection on this is rooted in the awareness of how messy it is to be a human and how messy the world is and how humble it is of God to come and be one of us and to take on the human experience. That remains the root of what I understand as gospel living, messy Jesus business. This awareness of like, the God we love and adore was born in a barn, right?
Right. Yeah.
The humblest of, and died on a cross, and like comes to us in ordinary bread and wine. These elements are broken and it's messy. That is actually the gospel in the Christian story, is like, it's a really messy thing. And that is in tension with what is oftentimes presented as an option in American Christianity. I don't know if this is a global situation, but for sure in the United States is like, if you want a life of prosperity and comfort and like beauty and whatever, be a Christian.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this
purity too.
Right. Purity. Right. There is this like thread, and I believe it is present in the Catholic Church just as much as other denominations. And it's one of the ways that I think the devil, if I can use that language, likes to pull us away from what Jesus really was wanting us to be in, which is in the places of mess, of discomfort, of paradox, of surrender, of total detachment, in the hardest places in the world. Like that's where we're called to love, and love is like the messiest human thing there is. So that's kind of my motivations for what Messy Jesus Business means, and the things I was hoping to explore in these conversations with folks over the years. I would say that over 90 conversations with incredible people of faith. These conversations have formed me, and they've deepened my own understanding of my faith. When I started Messy Jesus Business podcast, I was in my late 30s, and now I'm in my mid 40s. And when I think back to 5 years ago, I'm aware that I was just in a totally different stage of my own development. I can see now I was still in young adulthood. And now I feel like I'm in midlife. I'm definitely in midlife. And there's a lot of graces in that. I can see how this helped me to just move to a greater maturity and a greater freedom in myself and in my own faith life, and to shake myself free from the shackles of should. I should do this and I should do that. And to just like be like, you know what does God want of me? And like, what's the call of the day? And stop being what other people were telling me to be, and to be more myself, which is so liberating. It feels really deeply clear that I'm doing the work that God wants me to be doing by being by focusing more on helping my Franciscan community through this time that we're in, which is a time of great evolution as religious life shifts. And to be here and be a part of the shifts and the change is a privilege. It's a gift. It's a grace. I started off at the podcast by saying I was a writer, jail minister, and spiritual director. And I suppose I'm still a writer, but not in the same sort of way. And I still definitely do write, but not in the same sort of way. And then, but now it's vocation minister and candidate director for my Franciscan community. Yeah. So it's in some ways feels less radical, and my life feels more comfortable, but I also can see that is appropriate for all the changes I've gone through in the past 5 years.
Sure.
I think it was 3 years ago I was diagnosed with my eye disorder, and then I've had to adapt and adjust my life drastically since then, and it's pretty stressful at times. But that's part of the messiness of being human. And I'm really grateful that along the way I've come to the grace of acceptance and freedom so that I can be more closely aligned, I hope, with who I feel like God made me to be, and not who like the world is trying to make me into.
Yeah. Yeah.
The conversations I've had with some of the guests on Messy Jesus Business, though, were the ones who taught me these lessons and helped me to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have gotten there and grown in this way without sitting in conversation with Tessa Bilecki and hearing about her own transformation from leaving the Carmelites and the pain and the suffering and how that taught her, and then all the work she had to do to get to the place of being a hermit away from a community.
Wow.
Or listening to Shane Claiborne talk about his faith journey, or Jim Martin or Greg Boyle or Padraig O'Tuama calling me a waitress of God or something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, that fits. Right. And just like having these people that I admire and probably had put on little pedestals, and for them to just be so real to me and human, and for there to be this equality among us somehow helped me to be more awake to like Tara Desjardins says, like, we're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us. And nobody is any better or any different than anybody else as far as that is concerned. And to just like have this empathy and acceptance of myself along with the other, and to be less intimidated and accepting, it has been a total gift.
That's amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I know. I feel like the luckiest nun alive.
Yeah.
Good people, thank you for listening. I pray that the content of Messy Jesus Business fosters your faith, that it helps you to deepen your own contemplation and to say yes to gospel living, to following Jesus and entering into the mystery of wherever that takes you. I pray that you have the graces, the courage, the strength that you need to embrace the cross, embrace the mess and the beauty of the incarnation of God being one of us. And I hope that our paths cross again, that I see you at some sort of event, that you send me a note, that you stay in touch. Thank you for being part of Messy Jesus Business family. Thank you for being a friend. Peace and all good.